we have only 3 days left until a massive shift happens in the global economy, and this is going to affect every country on earth. All right, states of emergencies are being declared around the world for this event, and different countries, different states all around the world are reacting, and they are extremely worried about what comes next from this. Major CEOs are coming out and saying that they are anticipating, quote, a major crisis to happen from this event as well. All right, so this is a reshifting of the global order. This is a breaking down, and we will see a restructuring as well. This is all part of the plan. So let's get into all these big stories. We're going to have a long video today hitting all these topics because they're all related, and this is all an agenda. This is all a planned event. All right, this is happening on purpose, and this is the documentation of it. And make sure you hit that like and that sub and the bell, because I'm getting a ton of people saying that they aren't getting my notifications for my videos. So make sure you hit all that stuff down there for me if you like watching this kind of content, and let's dive into it. All right, so just to start off, all right, the Prime Minister of Sweden is warning that there could be massive rolling blackouts in Sweden. All right, so winter power blackout or winter power plant breakdowns could again spike electricity prices. The Prime Minister of Sweden warned again on Thursday of power outages due to electricity shortages across the Nord Pool region, with the 4th reactor at Sweden's nuclear power plant and the 3rd reactor at another nuclear power plant offline. All right, so they have multiple different reactors that are offline, and they're saying that they could see electricity shortages across the Nord Pool region. Why are all of these plants offline? In Finland, a different nuclear reactor's 3rd reactor has failed to start up, and Estonia's power plant is still offline. So all of these power plants across Europe and in the US, all right, I've covered multiple ones in the US, we'll get into a couple of those in just a second, are being shut down on purpose. And now the Prime Minister's coming out and warning of electricity shortages, and he is warning of a price and a spike in prices for the electricity. Okay, so the Baltic Sea System Operator Security of Supply Assessment says that the winter peak hour capacity buffer is too small. So the winter peak hour capacity buffer is too small according to this assessment. Even though there is enough capacity at the moment, a megawatt hour of electricity might cost as much as 4,000 euros again, like they did in August, if problems continue to accumulate. So in August, prices spiked to 4,000 euros per megawatt hour. And just to break that down for you, what exactly that means and what we could be seeing here in the US, because the US is implementing the same program, shutting down. California just is in the process right now, is shutting down their last nuclear power plant that they have, and they just shut down 4 hydroelectric dams as well. All right, and there's a ton of more new stuff that we'll get into, but that's what I've covered before. And America's facing the same problem, shutting down our nuclear power plants and shutting down our coal plants, and we're going to see electricity price spike. All right, so just to put that in perspective, 4,000 euros for a megawatt hour of electricity is approximately over $40,000 a year just for electricity. Okay, 40,000. The average home in the US consumes about 10.65 megawatt hours a year of electricity. So if it's 4,000 euros per megawatt hour and you use 10.65, it's over 40,000 euros per year just on electricity. Do you have money for that? Do you have $3,200 a year or $3,200 a month for electricity? This is insane that this is happening. All right, so, and the Prime Minister also added, quote, "It also means that in a crisis, coordinated action with our neighbors is the key to supply security." But just like this article noted, Finland has a nuclear reactor shut off. Estonia has one of their main power plants offline, and Sweden has 2 different reactors that are offline, affecting the Nord Pool region. All right, and the Prime Minister's coming out and warning that there could be blackouts, and we could see electricity spike to 4,000 euros per megawatt hour, $40,000 per year in electricity. This is what they want. They want prices to be this high. So, because they know you don't have $40,000, so you don't use any electricity. This is the point. If they can't get you to do it by force, then they're going to do it. They're going to have a workaround. They're going to do it economically. They're going to shut you down. They're just going to price you out. Just like the housing market, the housing crisis, all these housing prices have doubled or tripled in the past couple years. The price increase is normally over 20 years. That happened in the past 2 years. And now there's an affordability crisis for houses, and there's no starter homes. There's all these issues. This is what they want. They want people priced out, so they are just renters. They are forced to rent a home. They can't actually own a home or buy it. Same concept with electricity. Make the price so expensive that you are priced out, and you are just forced to not use any electricity. You are forced to not turn your heat on. They don't have to make a law. They just have to turn off the power plants and produce no electricity, and then prices will just automatically spike. And there's always going to be a demand for electricity, because there's always people that will be able to afford it. There's always some millionaire, billionaire, or just wealthy or person that will say, I need this electricity. I will pay $40,000 a year for electricity. You know what I mean? There's going to be a class of people that can afford that. And that's what they want. They want to just price people out, so the average person can't even turn their lights on, can't even turn your heat on. All right, this is an agenda. This is implemented, and we know because they keep shutting down power plants, and this is coming to the U.S. as well. All right, so this is happening because they're shutting down nuclear power plants in Sweden and Finland, but they're also shutting down tons of coal plants in the United States. So another one, a coal-fired plant imploded in New Jersey. This just happened for a battery array. So they are knocking down the coal plant to put a giant battery bank in this region instead. I don't know why you have to knock down a coal plant. I mean, how many acres does a coal plant really take? Couldn't you just like buy some more acreage to put this battery bank on? Like, how many acres? You know what I mean? How many batteries do you really need to put on this? Like, what do you need, 10 acres of batteries? Like, just buy 10 acres and put the batteries on it. I don't understand why you have to shut down and demolish it, implode it. They used explosives to literally destroy it, all right? And we'll get into what's happening in Europe. Some countries are actually turning them back on. They were about to destroy them and decommission them, but they're having an emergency and they're turning them back on. We'll get into that in just a second. But New Jersey is imploding one. So a former coal-fired power plant in New Jersey was imploded Friday, and its owners announced plans for a new $1 billion venture on the site where batteries will be deployed to store power from clean energy sources, including wind and solar. So this definitely is an issue with renewables, is battery banks, battery sources, okay? Storing this energy. This definitely is a huge issue. This would help these low periods where there is no production from solar or wind. But why do we have to tear down a coal plant just to build a battery bank? I don't understand. How much space do you really need for these battery banks? I really don't understand. So, and they were the last 2 coal-fired plants operating in the state until they closed 3 months ago. All right, so once again, the last 2 coal plants in a state wiped out. California wiped out their last nuclear plant. They're wiping out right now in the process of it. And New Jersey just got rid of their last 2. Quote, "This is the end of coal in the state." That's what the CEO of this company said. The closures are part of the latest wave of coal burning units to be retired as states try to fight climate change by requiring more carbon-free sources of electricity. Quote, wind doesn't always blow, solar doesn't always shine, he said. Quote, we need systems where you can store the energy. You have to build battery storage products. So that last line is completely true. It doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. This is the problem with, and not to mention just building them, the supply chain of building them is massive. The lithium mining, all this stuff is massive. But at least he has a point there. At least he's saying, I kind of agree. You do need massive battery banks if you want this to be successful. But we see what happens with these banks. They are susceptible to fires and they are extremely hard to put out. These lithium batteries, they just keep burning and they don't really go out well with water, with normal extinguishing that we do. All right, and just to put it in perspective, last month, or I guess this was in October, 2 months ago now, Germany destroyed a wind farm to expand a coal mine. All right, so here's the article. It was on October 31st, 2022. Wind farm set to be destroyed and converted into coal mine. A wind farm run by German energy company RWE is set to be destroyed to make room for the expansion of a coal mine. All right, that was in Germany. So they're realizing this wind farm ain't working and we need to actually get rid of this and go all in on coal, because coal has energy right now and it's available and you can just have it sitting there to burn instantly at any moment and get energy out of it right away. All right, so it's just a planned collapse. We're seeing Sweden warn of $4,000 megawatt per hour, which the average American household uses like 800 kilowatts, which is like 0.8 megawatts per month. So that'd be like 3,500 a month, 3,200, 3,500 a month for electricity, right? That's what they're warning, but they're also shutting down all the coal plants and power plants at the same time. This is an engineered collapse that we are seeing. And this is what France is doing in response to this, all right? Because France also has shut down a ton of their nuclear power plants as well. It's over half of France's nuclear reactors are offline right now. Over half of their reactors are offline. Doesn't even make sense. They're in the middle of an energy crisis and they're being forced to turn on their coal plants, all right? So here's the article. This is what they're saying, quote, necessary evil. France refires coal plant amid energy woes. The end of France's coal era seemed so certain last year that the operator of one of the country's last coal-burning plants posted an upbeat educational video on YouTube titled, quote, let's visit a coal plant that's about to be destroyed. Made a video on it. Let's destroy it. The plant in the northeastern town in France indeed halted coal production as scheduled earlier this year, but not for long. This week, its workers were back at the controls, transporting coal from storage heaps and refiring furnaces as part of emergency efforts to keep the heat and electricity on this winter. So multiple different countries are declaring emergencies for this. There's an even bigger emergency that's going on, and what's going to happen in just a few days is going to make this 10 times worse, 100 times worse, all right? And we will get to all that in just a second, but I want to just point out, Sweden is saying, the prime minister is saying, look, there's going to be blackouts, and they're shutting down the power plants at the same time, all right? And then France is saying, wait a minute, we are glad we didn't actually destroy this plant yet because we need it, and we're turning it back on. So I always say, why don't we just build the infrastructure to replace it first? You need to build the replacement first. This isn't something that you can do without. This is the energy grid. This is the most vital thing to commerce, all right? Banking, everything relies on electricity, and we need to have the replacement first. We need to build it first before we destroy what we already have, all right? Doesn't make sense. And they said, quote, working here, we know the negative impact of the coal plant, but nonetheless, we see it as a necessary evil. So it's evil. This coal plant is evil. It provides electricity for people. It's provided the highest standard of living that humans have ever had in the 21st century. most amount of people have electricity on Earth that have ever had it, have access to utilities. But coal plants are evil. It's evil. It's an amazing resource that we can dig out of the ground, and we can turn it into electricity to power a phone or a computer. It's incredible, but it's evil, right? It's evil. And he also said, this is the operator of the power plant, quote, and he said it's evil, quote, given his own power plant that he works at, he's the operator, it's, quote, evil. This is just like, why are you even running this thing? Quote, given the current state of the electrical network, I nonetheless fear greatly that this production tool is necessary in the medium term, he told. In France, the return to coal is surprising because the country started phasing it out decades ago and relies heavily on nuclear power instead. But this year, on top of Russia cutting off natural gas to Europe, nearly half of France's nuclear reactors shut down for maintenance or corrosion or other problems this year. So, middle of a energy crisis, they also have half of their nuclear reactors shut down right now, and they're being forced to fire up the coal plants just to keep the lights on in France. This is France. This is one of the most industrialized, biggest economies in the world, top 10 economies in the world. And for some reason, they can't keep their lights on, and it seems intentional. They were able to keep their lights on just a couple years ago, just last year. Everyone had their lights on. There was no issues. These stories did not exist last year, and all of a sudden, it's being amplified and it's being exacerbated and made worse, all right? So facing a worst case scenario of rolling power cuts to households, the government issued a decree in September to allow the Saint of Old to start again and continue activity after another coal plant in Western France, citing the exceptional and, quote, unforeseen context of energy supply challenges, all right? So they're starting up multiple coal plants in France because of this. And the president had initially vowed to close all coal burning plants in the country by the end of this year due to climate related concerns, right? So they were going to have them all closed. That was the goal, have them all shut down. Thankfully, they weren't all destroyed, because then what would they be doing? Then what would France be doing? They would be sitting in the dark right now. Germany is also doing the same thing with some of their coal plants as well, because they're facing an energy crisis too. So Uniper revives an oil-fired power plant as Germany saves gas, right? So they're reviving their old power plants as well that they shut down. So it says the Irsching 3 station to return in February as a backup. That's in addition to 2 coal plants brought back this year as well in Germany. So they're shutting it down, and they're just doing the bare minimum. They'll just bring back 2 just to barely keep the lights on, to barely keep us in suspense until the big one happens, all right? That's what this is heading towards, a massive reset of our grid, of our internet, of communications, all right? They need to break it down to build it back up. They've lost control of the internet. They've lost control of the grid. They've lost control of, there's too much freedom, right? I'm not saying this. This is what they think. There's too much freedom, and they don't control it enough. So they need to reset it. They need to shut it down so they can track, trace everything, all right? What's the solution to having $40,000 energy bills a year? They have to monitor, track, and trace, implement a social credit, implement a carbon credit system around this dystopia that they're creating as a solution. They always implement a problem, and then they always have the solution, right? So they are implementing the problem, they're engineering it, and we're seeing it in real time happen, this collapse. And the solution is going to be electricity rationing, carbon credit rationing, energy credits. Everything is tracked, traced, and manipulated. That's why Biden signed an executive order, and the Federal Reserve just started a couple weeks ago with the New York Fed a pilot program for a central bank digital currency that they are about to implement, right? Because once you have that, It's all tracked, it's all traced, and it's all put into a system to make sure that you're not having excess energy. My last video, I was talking about a little bit how companies are implementing a program with your smart meter to ration your electricity, but they said they're going to pay you. They said they're going to pay you for it. They're going to compensate you for it. But this is the next wave. This is the next step. This is why I keep harping on it, because you need to get ready. You need to not be so. It's one of these vulnerabilities that everyone has. Everyone's attached to the grid. Everyone, you know what I mean? Unless you're completely off grid with solar, pretty much 99% of people are attached to the grid and get most of their electricity from the grid, and they're completely vulnerable. 95% of people have smart meters on their home too. They don't even know. They just come and put these meters on, and this is it. They already put in the infrastructure all around you. They're just waiting to flip the switch, right? That's all it takes. So all this is happening, shutting down coal plants in the US, New Jersey, all right? Shutting down the biggest coal plant in Colorado is shutting down as well. I covered that last week. All this stuff's happening. They're refiring them in Europe, and now a West Virginia coal rep is coming out and warning of prolonged blackouts for the United States as well. He's warning this is coming next. So regulatory policies put Americans at risk for long blackouts. West Virginia coal rep says, quote, if we have the type of prolonged extreme frigid weather events this winter like we've had, we will not be able to withstand that. West Virginia Coal Association president told Fox News, quote, regions of the country will be looking at blackouts and brownouts for prolonged periods of time. This is true, right? They're shutting down coal plants left and right. They're shutting down the coal industry, the mining industry with regulations. All these different things are hitting our power grid constantly. It's constantly being just chipped away at, right? Incrementally. Incrementalism is the key to all this, because everyone wants the collapse to just happen, like some big thing to happen, which definitely could happen, all right? We could have some kind of war or something crazy could happen that would be sudden. But the key to their plan is incrementalism. All right, they've had these plans for decades and decades, and now we are just getting really close to the center because they've been chipping away, and once they get to the center, that's the switch. That's when they're going to do it, but they got to chip away slowly. They can't just flip the lights off. It has to be slowly engineered. People have to be slowly conditioned, and we have to be, it's like the boiling frog analogy. Put them in a pot of cold water and turn the heat up and then boil them. He won't notice, right? He will get boiled because the heat of the water, the temperature just slowly rises, and he just gets used to it. He's just like, okay, it just feels normal until he's boiling, right? If they just threw him in the pot of boiling water right away, he would jump right out. That's the analogy here, right? And that's what they're doing to us. It's just incrementalism over decades of shutting down our energy grid, shutting down the whole supply of everything around us, right? The electricity grid and the fuel grid. It literally is the lifeblood of the global economy and of America. So he said, quote, regions of the country will be looking at blackouts and brownouts for prolonged periods of time. Quote, we may very well find ourselves rationing electricity as well, Hamilton said, like other countries are already doing. Since 2009, when Biden became vice president, the United States went from nearly 600 coal plants to 269 in 2021, almost a 55% drop. So in just over a decade, over half of our coal plants have been shut down, 600 to 269. Have those all been replaced? Have all of these energy points been replaced with the same amount or more of energy output? energy export, energy output. I combine those two words there, energy output. I don't think so. I highly doubt it that we've replaced over 300 coal plants being shut down, right? 331 coal plants being shut down in a little over a decade, right? Power outages are, quote, likely to occur if we continue down this path of shutting down these plants, Hamilton said. Coal is used to generate nearly 22% of the nation's power source in 2021, while all fossil fuels accounted for about 61%. Meanwhile, less than a quarter of the U.S. electricity relied on non-renewable energy sources, and the other amount is made up by nuclear. All right, so 22% just from coal, 61% is fossil fuels, only a quarter is renewables. If we want to shut down all this coal, then something needs to take up that 22%. What is filling the gap for that 22%? That's a massive amount. All of these years, think about all these years, decades of subsidies, all this stuff that we've seen for renewable energy, and it only accounts for less than a quarter of the grid capacity. Still only accounts for less than a quarter. We can't just shut down 22% of the nation's power capacity with coal and expect to replace it with renewable energy right away, when it took decades and decades just to get to less than a quarter. All right, this takes time. So, I mean, build the replacement before you tear down what's already working. Show me that this works. Make sure it has energy output that's appropriate. Make sure it can actually do the job. And then, okay, go for it. Then you can do whatever you want. I'm not the expert here, but at least this is just common sense. At least build your replacement before you shut it down. This is our energy grid. This is something we cannot do without. All right. And he said, quote, the electric grid and the reliability of household and industrial power is at risk. Quote, we're going into winter months now, and our fleet of renewable intermittent windmills and solar panels are not going to be able to pick up the load. Since taking office, Biden has pledged to cut carbon emissions in half by 2030 and has pushed a climate agenda that moves the nation towards green energy and away from fossil fuels. The EPA has implemented stricter requirements on businesses and power plants, all that good stuff, right? So this is part of the agenda. This is part of the 2030 agenda to cut emissions in half by 2030, which is carbon dioxide, which is literally what plants breathe. It's not even, they don't even target carbon monoxide, which is actually poisonous to you, all right? That's, you can die from like breathing in too much carbon monoxide. They don't even target carbon monoxide. It's always carbon dioxide, which plants literally breathe, right? And carbon is the base. Everything on Earth is a carbon-based life form, right? All of the species are based on carbon molecules, right? They need carbon because carbon has 4 different bonding points. It's a very open molecule, and it's the base of all life on Earth, right? Carbon life, carbon-based life forms, and apparently cut carbon in half by 2030. That's why this is also a depopulation agenda. Depopulation agenda. That's the key to all this, is to get us into these systems, and at the same time, hey, millions of people might starve to death. The UN has warned of this, right? Millions of people might starve to death, and millions of people might freeze, right? But we have to implement this agenda because it's both. We get to shut down industry, and we also get to depopulate carbon-based life forms. That's what it feels like. Everything on Earth is carbon-based, and it's always an attack on carbon. And we are carbon, right? Your body is a carbon-based body, right? You're a carbon-based species. Everything on Earth is, all right? Quote, this president and the members of Congress have received warning after warning that they're closing too many coal plants and with coal plants goes your base load generation. Quote, there's a natural gravitation towards green energy, but it's going to take decades, all right? So this is completely true too. Coal plants provide your base load generation. It's like a diesel engine versus a electric engine. A diesel truck is going to be able to carry way more, generate way more power right away than an electric motor, especially a diesel truck towing through the mountains. Good luck with an electric semi truck towing through the mountains, right? Because you need this power generation right away, and fossil fuels allows you to access this right away, all right? You can just hit the pedal and you get more power, you get more torque, you get everything right away. And it's just not the same, right? It's the same thing with the grid. You can't just deal with these ebbs and flows just with the battery, right? The batteries are sensitive. I stayed at a house I was on complete solar, all right, and we had to be careful turning on too many things at once, all right? We couldn't turn on like the vacuum and the dishwasher and have all the lights on and have the TV on and all the, you know what I mean? We couldn't have all the stuff on at the same time. If you've ever been in an RV, all right, that has a battery, it's very easy to overload that, all right? You turn on too many things. It's the same concept. You can easily overload this electrics, you know, green energy sources, renewable sources, and you need the coal for your base load generation, right? So this also comes as there's just more shutdowns, right? And it's happening in California a lot, it seems like. So in historic move, California bans new oil wells, phasing out existing ones as well, right? So the Los Angeles, sorry about that, it's getting a little toasty in here. I gotta get the air on really quick, get some fresh air in here for just a second, all right? But it says, the Los Angeles City Council voted on Friday to phase out all oil drilling in LA and to ban new wells, a historic move in a city that was built by a once booming petroleum industry. According to the city's planning department, Los Angeles has 26 oil and gas fields and more than 5,000 oil and gas wells. Some of the wells are active while others are idle. The move is opposed by the oil industry, whose leader warned city officials that the phase out will hurt the city's finances and make LA more dependent on foreign oil. It's always the thing. It's always just like cut the power. It's never, which I don't want this either, but it's never just like use electricity, right? And it's always these rich billionaires and elites that are telling the general public how to use their energy when their energy consumption is 100x, 1000x what yours is. You know what I mean? I read something, the average billionaire, their carbon footprint or whatever, I think it was equivalent to almost 1 billion people, or maybe it was a million people, right? But still, you get few thousand billionaires and they're contributing the same amount of carbon that everyone else on Earth is contributing. So we have like 8 billion people on Earth, and then we have like a few thousand billionaires. They are contributing, they're producing the same amount of carbon emissions that all 8 billion of us are producing. Just a few thousand billionaires, and this was a study that came out just recently, and they're the ones setting the policy and telling you that you drive your car too much. Oh, I got my car on right now. I'm sitting here in idle. My car, I turned the AC on. Uh-oh. Carbon police, carbon alert. Somebody report me, all right? Seriously, it's going to get to this thing. It's like they're going to be monitoring everything. It's like, wait a minute. This guy had his phone on for an hour recording a video in his car. I don't think that was carbon approved. All right, so LA, not surprising. I didn't even know there was oil wells in LA. I've never been there. It's just not a place, but apparently there's thousands of them, right? Thousands of oil and gas wells in LA, and they're shutting them all down. All right. So, and just look for all of California to do this as well, because it always happens in these, you know, these major dystopian cities like LA, San Fran, or something. And no offense if you live there, I live near Denver, all right? It's dystopian there too. But especially if you live in the city, all right? It always starts there and then it goes statewide. So look for this to spread to more cities, right? Look for prices to go up even more on gas there, and then look for California to just do it. And then look for them to try to force it on other states as well, saying like, oh, you got to have X amount of renewables if we're going to buy your oil or whatever. You know what I mean? They always implement these crazy rules on other countries and on other states and try to get them to follow their rules. All right. So shutting it down, look for California to do that too. Shut down all of their oil and gas wells because they're dirty. Just like this France operator said, he said it's evil. He said coal plants are evil. All right. Even though I bet France's coal plants are some of the most highly scrubbed and clean producing plants that we have, right? Probably some of the best ones on earth with all their regulations, but they still want to shut them down. Probably produce no emissions with all the scrubbers and different technology they have, but they still want to shut them down, all right? And I just want to hit this really quick too, and then we'll get into some more big stuff, right? But I just thought this was just another thing being shut down. So in Nevada, the Nevada toad and geothermal power fight gets endangered status, right? So there's this toad that they're trying to build a geothermal power plant near, which I believe geothermal is even a green energy source, a renewable green source. Apparently that's what I was reading. And they don't want this power plant to be built because of a toad in Nevada. And I get animals, I get there's pollution and all the stuff, and I love animals, all right? But at the same time, we are facing an energy crisis, and people are important too, right? People should be the top priority here in an emergency like this. So a tiny Nevada toad at the center of a legal battle over a geothermal power project has officially been declared an endangered species after the U.S. wildlife officials temporarily listed it on a rarely used emergency basis. So this ruling makes final the listing of the Dixie Valley toad. The spectacular quarter-sized amphibian, quote, is currently at risk of extinction throughout its range, primarily due to the approval and commencement of geothermal development. Other threats to the toad include groundwater pumping, agriculture, climate change, and disease from bullfrogs. So, and it said this is the first time in 20 years they have taken this emergency action. So they did an emergency endangered species listing for this toad to prevent the geothermal power plant being built in Nevada, right? So I get animals too, right? Maybe they could have had a better location, but I'm sure the people of Nevada would have loved to have a new power plant there that's supposed to be green, supposed to be like a green energy, geothermal power, and it would bring down their electricity prices. I'm sure they would love that, but I don't think they are going to get it after this new ruling, right? So let's dive into what these executives are saying too. We have two different executives giving two different warnings that are both devastating for the global economy, right? And it just means that we are in trouble, right? We're going to see even more trouble, and they see it on the horizon. So a oil industry executive warns of a, quote, major crisis in the next few weeks, quote, major crisis in the next few weeks. So this is what he said. He said the strategic petroleum reserves, unfortunately, has become the strategic political reserve, and we have grave concerns about how it has been so politicized. This is for emergency purposes, not to lower gasoline prices during a time of political season, right? This is what a oil exec is saying. He said, quote, "But I think doing this willy-nilly and doing it in a way that doesn't make sense for the market we're in, we could be dealing with another major oil crisis here in the next few weeks." He said, quote, "We're also real concerned about how long or how low it has gone. The lowest level since 1984, not necessarily because of market conditions, but because of political concerns." The oil industry exec emphasized the absolute importance of refilling the reserves and doing so with a non-political strategy. The Biden administration plans to halt oil sales from the strategic petroleum reserves once the price dips below $70 a barrel. And he said, quote, "That should be a real concern for all Americans." All right, so, quote, "We could be dealing with another major oil crisis here in the next few weeks." That's what he's warning of. These strategic petroleum reserves this problem has not gone away, because nobody's made this point. I just was thinking about this. The amount of oil that has to be bought off the markets, I believe I did the calculations, I don't remember exactly, but it was over 30 days of the US's total consumption of oil, right? So a massive amount of oil is going to have to be taken off the market to refill these strategic reserves, and doing that is going to make prices go even higher, right? So it's a catch-22. You need to refill the reserves because you've been draining them, keeping prices down, and we could have an emergency and have no oil. But to refill it, you have to take out 30 days worth of American oil from the international markets or domestic markets to refill this, and that's going to cause a massive shockwave to the markets and cause prices to most likely go up. All right, so it's one of these things that's you cut your own nose off to do this. All right, yeah, maybe you brought down gas prices a little bit, but once we see you got to pay the piper, they might go up even more than they did before. All right, so just another thing that we are being warned of that could happen, and you need to get prepared. You need to be ready for energy grid collapse, right? You need to be ready for energy rationing, energy shortages, no gas at gas stations. It's like this with food. We are going to enter a point where there's not going to be food. Yeah, the price might not be going up anymore, but we're going to get to a point where there's just no food, right? Because it's too expensive to even produce the food, and we don't know, and the producers don't know how much they're going to be able to sell it for, so they're going to scale back, right? This is what we're going to see with gas as well too. So we are also seeing this warning from the Volkswagen executive, right? He's coming out and warning. And by the way, Volkswagen has a very questionable past. If you didn't know, I don't want to get into it, but look up their history. Very questionable past. And it's kind of ironic that it's such a big brand these days. And why doesn't it get canceled? I want to know, why isn't Volkswagen canceled? All right, so go look into that yourself. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you do know what I'm talking about, I don't get it. Why isn't it canceled? All right, but I can't really talk about it on here. So rising costs of European energy makes EV battery plants, quote, unfeasible, Volkswagen exec says. So rising costs of European energy makes electric vehicle battery plants unfeasible. So this is what people don't realize. It takes a massive amount of energy to produce these electric cars, to produce these batteries, to get this lithium, the copper, the cobalt, to get all these critical minerals that they need. It takes a massive amount of energy, and then they have to build it in factories too that are fueled by fossil fuels. The electricity grid is mostly fossil fuels, and these factories stay on with fossil fuels, and they're using fossil fuels to build electric vehicle batteries and parts, right? And if the price of fossil fuels are too high, you can't build the electric batteries. It doesn't work. That's what I'm saying. Have the coal going, build the infrastructure first before you get rid of it, right? At least be like reasonable, at least like act like you're being reasonable and this isn't intentionally shutting down. So Volkswagen brand CEO said this week that investments in German and EU projects will no longer make financial sense if, quote, policymakers fail to control ballooning energy prices in the long term, according to the Times. All right, so he's saying it's not going to make sense. They're not going to be able to produce these wonderful electric vehicles in Europe anymore. It's not going to make sense. In a post on LinkedIn, he said, unless we manage to reduce energy prices in Germany and Europe quickly and reliably, investments in energy-intensive production and new battery cell factories in Germany and the EU will be practically unviable. The value creation in this area will take place elsewhere. So he's saying energy prices are so high, it doesn't make sense to do business here. This is already happening with the aluminum and steel industry in Europe as well. Their energy prices are extremely high because they need extreme amounts of energy to smelt metals and to refine these ores. They need lots of energy, and lots of factories, I reported on this months ago in the summer, are shutting down, all right? And these are plants that take 6 months to turn back on, and they take a massive amount of energy to just turn back on, but it's so expensive just to operate there, taking the loss and turning them off, right? This affects everything. This is a shutdown of our economy, right? It says last week, French and German economy ministers proposed an outline for policy cooperation that Schaefer claims, quote, falls short in crucial areas and does not address the envisioned priorities. Quote, outdated and bureaucratic state aid rules fail to focus enough on, quote, the short-term ramp-up, scaling, and industrialization of production. The report says that the EU officials are focusing on responding to President Joe Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, which they say, quote, violates World Trade Organization rules and discriminates against non-U.S. companies, right? So there was a report, I should have included this, but I just remembered when I read this out. EU officials are coming out and accusing the U.S. of profiteering off this whole war and off of this whole energy and economic situation. They're coming out and accusing them of profiteering and making things maybe worse on purpose so they can make more money. And now they're even saying the Inflation Reduction Act, which I doubt reduces inflation. Even Bernie Sanders was coming out and saying that this is not going to reduce inflation, right? But what it does is give a ton of subsidies and money to green companies, green technologies, all this stuff, all these clean energies. And Europe is saying, hey, wait a minute, we're supposed to be producing this, and now you're subsidizing these companies too. They're saying you're making our energy prices super high by this proxy war, right? You are implementing all these things, the Nord Stream, all this stuff's going on, right? We don't really know what's going on with that, but all these things are happening to make energy prices skyrocket, right? And the EU is getting worried because Volkswagen is saying, hey, we can't even operate in your territories anymore. And then at the same time, the US just signed a bill subsidizing all these companies, giving them a bunch of money too. So they're definitely going to want to go to the US, and they're going to bail out of the EU and bail out of Europe. And officials are coming out and saying, hey, the US, seems like the US is profiteering here. Seems like the US is trying to make money off of this situation, kind of exploit the situation. This is what the US always does, all right? And I'm American, I love America, but I don't love exploitation and I don't love manipulation, all right? And that's what's going on, and it's a engineered collapse of Europe. That's what we're seeing right now, and it's also happening in the US. It's just going to happen after Europe, most likely. All right, so let's get into Germany's largest state declares a state of emergency amid the energy crisis. All right, so the North Rhine-Westphalia, the biggest state in Germany in terms of economy and population, has declared an emergency situation amid the energy crisis in order to be allowed to take on more debt. All right, so this is getting bad, guys. It's getting really bad. We are having all this inflation, all these problems, and their only solution is to declare a state of emergency so they can take on more debt to buy more energy, which is just going to make inflation and increase energy prices even more. All right, that's what they don't. You can't print your way out of these crises. The only way to get out of this is to produce more energy. It's the only way. And for some reason, they want to do everything else except that. It's because it's a collapse. It's because it's for depopulation. That's why. So the NRW, home to 20 of the 50 largest German companies, declared a, quote, extraordinary emergency situation to be able to access more loans which would otherwise be denied to the state because of a rule on how much debt a state can borrow. Right? So they've maxed out their borrowing limit, the state has in Germany, the North Rhine-Westphalia, and they're declaring an emergency so they can borrow more money to buy energy. This is insane. This is dystopian. This is Germany. This is like the 5th biggest economy in the world, 4th, 5th, something like that. It's top 5 economy in the world. And they can't keep their lights on, right? This is insane. This is dystopian. This is a engineered collapse. So the NRW has decided to borrow another $5.2 billion to cope with the energy crisis after declaring the emergency situation that allows the state to take on more loans. The state's government is redrafting the 2023 budget and has planned to allocate $3.6 billion to energy relief measures from loans previously taken for the sea relief that haven't been used. Right? So they're even taking all this funny money they printed in the last 2 years. They're scrounging up some of that because they just had it sitting around apparently that they just don't use. You see this all over the world. They printed so much money that they just have all these funds for certain things that they just don't use, and then they reappropriate it. So now they're using that to buy energy, right? It says the NRW's regional economy has more than 700,000 small and medium-sized companies, the state said in a presentation to investors. The state's GDP slumped by 2.8% in the third quarter, and Germany's federal government hasn't declared an emergency situation yet. But 2 other states have resorted to emergency situations in their 2023 state budget drafts as well, though. All right, so other states in Germany are also about to declare this emergency situation to borrow more money for energy, and potentially Germany's federal government will have to do this as well, right? This is crazy that we are even living in a situation like this where just a few years ago wasn't a big deal. It's no big deal. But now we are being told that blackouts are coming. Your lights are going to be turned off. Just a few weeks ago in Germany, they were warning too that with these rolling blackouts that are coming, there could be banking collapses as well, right? Banking collapse as well. So think about it. The banks can't communicate. Your debit card doesn't work. They can't communicate with each other. They can't communicate with the merchant or anything when the power's out, right? This has happened if you've ever been in Florida or have ever had an extended power outage situation, a hurricane or something, or a blackout from winter. Then do you know how it is? Places only take cash. Some places just shut down, right? They don't take anything. But most places, they just take cash because they can't process any payments when there's no power. None of the networks work. None of the communications work when there's no power, right? And German officials were warning of this just a couple weeks ago, and they were telling Germans, And people know this over there. They were saying, chill out on the cash withdrawals because you're going to withdraw too much cash. We don't have enough cash for you to withdraw because people are worried about blackouts this winter, right? That's what they're saying. They're saying, get your cash, but chill out, calm down. Don't get too much because we might have to restrict your withdrawals, all right? So get ready, guys. Make sure you have cash. Make sure you have a heat source. Make sure you have a wood stove. Make sure you have a generator. Make sure you have even just snow shovels, snow chains, coats, boots. Things are so sketchy with geoengineering, weather manipulation. Even behind me over here, these are not real clouds. These are manipulated, fake, geoengineered clouds, okay? Aerosol injected clouds. All right, you probably can't see them as closely, but my point is that weather manipulation, geoengineering is real. We could see winter weather events happen anywhere. You never know. They could even happen in very obscure places, all right? Like Texas, Florida. We could see winter weather events happen in places where they don't normally happen. And this is all real. I've made multiple videos on this, documenting it all, what's going on. I'll have to make a whole nother one soon because there's a bunch of other new stuff that came out just recently about it. But it's a threat too. You might think you're safe. You might think, oh, I'm in the South or I'm wherever. This weather manipulation, it's real. It's called geoengineering. It's real. There's a million CNN articles about it. The White House has admitted it. It's real. It's not a theory anymore. It's completely 100% real and admitted. And we already know this. You can see it. I'm just saying, though, don't think you're just safe even if you're in the South or something, because who knows? We could see manipulated weather events in regions that don't normally get cold. Just like look what happened in Texas a couple years ago. They had the snow and it wiped out their grid, their power grid, all right? Caused massive damage to it because they weren't ready for it. My point is, you never know. Be prepared. Even if you're down south, you might think you're safe. Like, oh, we're in Florida. You never know. These engineered weather events could happen. And this is real. Don't act like it's like this is crazy or something. This is completely real. It's completely admitted. China has a whole geoengineering program with their government, and they admit this, and they brag on TV how much water they produce because they hit these drought-stricken regions with a ton of water, and they're like, yeah, we cured the drought here. We did all this. You know, I mean, sometimes it caused massive flooding, but these programs are real, all right? It's not made up, completely real here. And my point is that don't think you're safe just because you're in the South or something. It doesn't get cold. You could see winter blackouts as well, all right? So it says Germany may have to take drastic measures such as gas rationing if levels of gas and storage drop below 40% by February 1st next year, according to the German Federal Network Agency, which will enact such measures if necessary. If gas storage levels drop below 40% by February 1st, this will be considered a critical level, Klaus Miller, the president of the German Federal Network Agency, said. Germany is currently in a stage 2 level of alert and could go into a level 3 emergency if gas stocks fall into critically low levels. All right, so they're already in a stage 2 level of alert and could be a level 3 emergency if these gas stocks drop. And look for them too. All right, look for this to happen because they're just going to dwindle throughout winter. And this happening right here too in 3 days is going to make it even worse. All right, even worse. And it's pretty ironic these rules being implemented when the Nord Stream pipeline is destroyed. All these other things have happened before this, and now they're really clamping down, shutting it down. So we have 3 days until the West's restrictive new oil measures on Russia go into effect. We have 3 days. So that's why I wanted this to be the last point. We have all this stuff going on. The Swedish Prime Minister warning, the head of the German Federal Network Agency. We have the CEO. We have a CEO of the oil industry. We have the CEO of Volkswagen. All right. All these people coming out saying we're in an energy crisis. It's collapsing. But 3 days until the West's restrictive new oil measures on Russia go into effect. They're still doing it. They're still going to ban this Russian oil. So the European Union will ban all seaborne imports of Russian oil, a move that takes effect Monday. Also, the U.S. and other members of the G7 will attempt to impose a price cap on the oil Russia continues to sell to other parts of the world. All right? So completely banned in the EU, banned. And they're trying to get the G7 to do all this too, to implement the same agenda too, the U.S., Japan as well. So also the U.S. and other members of the G7 will attempt to impose a price cap on oil selling in other parts of the world. I just read that. Sorry about that. The two moves are intended to limit Russia's ability to fund its war in Ukraine, but are designed to prevent disruptions in oil supplies that could cause higher prices. Analysts say the price cap, spearheaded by the U.S. Treasury Department, could be difficult to enforce. So complete ban in the EU, and they're saying potentially the rest of the G7 countries too, coming very soon, the U.S. and Japan. This is going to rock international markets, rock them. And then they're trying to implement a price cap on the rest of the world for Russian oil. Like India or someone's going to like agree to a price cap that the EU agreed to. No. India said they're going to buy whatever they want. They're not going to follow this. Same thing with China. And they're going to pay whatever price they want for it. They're not going to follow the EU. And to be honest, Russia is probably just going to cut back production, cause more scarcity, and then they're just going to, whatever they have, they're just going to flood it all to India and China, and they're just going to get it cheap. And then they'll probably just resell it on the markets and make money. A lot of it, or at least a portion of it. India's been doing this the past 8 or 9 months. India's been doing this. I made a whole video on when this broke, like a few months into all this stuff. I made a whole video on it, how India got caught selling Russian oil in New York on the New York oil exchanges. All right, I made a whole video on it. So Ben Cahill, senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, says a price cap on Russian oil has never been tried before. Most energy sanctions, like those against Iran and Venezuela, target volume, not price. What policymakers are trying to do is cut the world's largest oil exporter out of the market to a large degree, right? The world's largest oil exporter, trying to cut it. Like, this is insane. This is economic war as well. When does Russia say that the EU is committing economic war against Russia? This is part of war. Like, war isn't just kinetic and having bombs being dropped and like, war is also strategic and economic, and this is technically economic war on Russia, right? Trying to limit the price that Russia can sell their oil in the entire world. That's what they're trying to do. This is insane. This is just like who do they think they are? You know, like, who do you think you can't do this? It doesn't work. It's not going to work. It's going to backfire, and it's going to be bad for the EU, the US, all the Western states that cannot buy this oil. And China and India are just going to be getting extremely cheap oil from Russia while we are going to be suffering. All right, so they're trying to cut the world's largest oil exporter out of the market. All right, they're trying to cut Russia off from Europe, which has always been one of the largest export destinations for Russia. The U.S. was concerned that the EU ban on oil and insurance could remove at least 1 million barrels a day of Russian crude oil off the market, causing a sharp spike in the price. Russia supplies about 10% of the world's oil production. All right, so engineered collapse. We have days until they implement this, and I was hoping they weren't going to actually go through it, but they're going through with it. This is happening, and we have days until we see this happens. At the same time, the strategic oil reserves are at zero, zip nada. This would be a good time to maybe have the reserves, so we could buffer something like this. All right, I don't even agree with implementing this at all, but I'm just saying if you're going to implement it, maybe it'd be good to have the reserves to buffer the price of oil right now, right? But that's gone. That's not going to happen. And this comes as the EU can't quit Russian gas, right? So we've heard all this talk about how terrible Russia is, and we're going to ban their oil and cut them off. But get this. While supplies of natural gas delivered by pipeline fell dramatically this year, liquid natural gas imports from Russia into the EU increased by 46% year on year in the first 9 months of 2022, according to the European Commission figures. All right. So while supplies of natural gas delivered by pipeline went down, their imports from Russia into the EU went up 46% since last year. So we hear all this, how terrible it is, but the EU has imported 46% more liquid natural gas a year-on-year basis in the first 9 months of 2022, right? That is insane. How do you import 46% more when you're in the middle of this giant economic war, apparently, with all these sanctions and everything? You're the one funding this. You are funding these. You're giving them a ton of money. You keep saying this is your agenda, is to defund Russia, but apparently not, because the EU increased imports of Russian LNG by 46% in the first 9 months of 2022. Insane, and just shows how hypocritical they are. All right. So this is one more story that I just wanted to touch really quick at the end here, because I thought this was kind of strange. All right, kind of weird. Doesn't really have anything to do with all this other stuff, but what's going on? It's kind of like a whodunit. I wanted to see what you guys thought about this. So Biden's Secret Service rental vehicles burst into flames after he left his Nantucket vacation. Right. So the Secret Service rented 5 different vehicles, and once they were returned, they all caught fire very suspiciously, and only the engines burned. Very weird, just very strange. I just want to know what you guys think was happening here. Was this somebody's like sending a message or something? Like, was this a different country? All right, that was like one option I was thinking. Another option, was this a cover-up of something? Were these vehicles used for something and they needed to be burned? They were burned in a very strange way too. Only the engine blocks burned on 5 different vehicles, and only these 5 vehicles burned, even though they were in a lot of cars. Very strange and just kind of suspicious. Was this like somebody sending a message, and they were burned after they were returned to the rental place? So was this like sending a message, or was this a destruction of like evidence or something? Maybe these cars were used for something. I thought it was very strange that the president, even our Secret Service, was even renting cars. They use rental cars. I thought that was just strange too, that rental cars are secure enough for the Secret Service. I didn't know that. Maybe that's what they normally do, but I thought that was kind of strange protocol as well. And then 5 of the 5 different rental vehicles burst into flames while they were sitting in the lot. No keys or anything. They were turned off. They were returned to the rental car lot, and they were all sitting near each other, just like out in the lot, whatever, and not turned on, completely off, everything off, and then all 5 of them burned. It's very strange. I just wanted to throw that in there because I read that article and thought it was kind of interesting. I have no idea what happened, all right, but it's weird. Was it a cover-up? Like, are they trying to hide something, or was this a adversary sending a message, like burning these cars they saw? Maybe they were watching them in these cars, and then these cars got burnt once they got returned, kind of as a sign, like, hey, we could have burned them we could have done something while you were in them. Who knows? I have no idea. I wanted to see what you guys thought, because you guys always have good theories and good ideas and different perspectives that I don't think about sometimes. So let me know what you think about all this big news. All right, Germany is declaring a state of emergency to borrow more money to buy energy. All right, all these dystopian things are happening, and we only have a few days until the West tries to ban Russian oil completely. All right, that's going to be a big shock to the international markets, the fuel markets, energy markets. Everything is going to be affected by this very soon. So get prepared now, guys. Stock up on all your stuff. Get prepared for winter blackouts, all right? And get prepared, your mind, your body, all that stuff to get outside, go on a walk, go look at the mountains, go watch the sunset, go play in the snow, go play with your kids, go walk your dog. Do something wholesome as well too, because that's what I have to do. I have to like stay sane. All this stuff's happening. I'm dived in, you know, reading all the stuff all day, trying to get these articles together for you guys, digging deep. But I gotta go, I gotta hang out with my kids, you know what I mean? I gotta go to the park with my kids or do something fun, you know what I mean? Gotta go to the aquarium or do something just wholesome as well too, just so you feel the stress off you, because I know this is a lot of stress. I know this is a lot of stuff going on that we are facing. We are facing major crisis after crisis, but don't let it get you down, guys. I get down sometimes too. My eyes been killing me here, all right? This is why I've been wearing the sunglasses, because this eye has been in extreme pain for weeks. It's getting a little bit better, but I have had a lot of vision damage to the eye. I've lost a ton of vision in it, and this is a recurring thing where I have these flare-ups and then I lose vision in my eyes, and it seems to be targeting my left eye a lot lately, and I've been losing a bunch of vision in it. So that's why I've been wearing these glasses, all right? I've been kind of down about that, stressed out about that too. I haven't been able to work as much because sometimes it hurts just to look at my computer screen. Hurts my eye, right? It's just like too bright, it's too much. I don't know what it is. It hurts to look at the computer and read with my eyes sometimes, right? So I've been a little down about that, but still blessed, still thankful. I still like to get out. I still like to enjoy life. So I'm just putting it out there, right? For you to do the same thing, all right? So I hope you have big blessings in your life. Hope you have big blessings on your homestead, for your preparedness, for your job, for your family, for your dog, your cat, your chickens, your goats, your cows. I hope you have big blessings in whatever goal you're pursuing. I hope you get it. And I hope you have big blessings all throughout your life, all right? So thank you guys for watching. Please hit it up down there. Hit that like, hit the sub. Lots of people are saying that they are subbed, but they don't get any notifications from me or anything. So make sure you hit the bell too. If you want to get notified for my videos, if you want to watch them, hit the bell and you will get a notification from YouTube when I post, all right? And make sure you watch it if you get that bell, all right? So thank you guys for watching. You have a big old blessed day.